Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the very last actual full-on lecture that's we've got this semester. So congratulations, well done on getting this far. Hopefully, your semester's wrapping up all right. Um, Quick reminder that to keep an eye out for the review video for the final exam, and feel free to shoot me any questions that you've got as you prepare for that. So the dates and the timelines and the types of questions, things like that, they're all going to be discussed in that final the final exam review video. So again, keep an eye out for that. Today's topic is putting it all together. So I'd like to spend our kind of our last full class together making a few more connections and just kind of hammering home some things that I think are super, super important. And to be clear at the outset, I'm not going to sit here and talk about different facts of what government looks like. Say, oh, it's super important that you remember the Senate serves for 6 years, right? That has its place, and I'm not going to disparage those things, but I wanted to talk more about overarching ideas and some of the things that I've been working to kind of draw out throughout the course of the semester, and hopefully kind of getting you to really think about and consider, because you and I can disagree on policy issues. You and I can disagree on whether the government should be bigger or smaller, or whatever it is, right? And that's going to happen. You are never ever going to find somebody with whom you are 100% completely in agreement on everything. It just doesn't happen. But what we can do is we can focus a little bit today on our role within the government itself, within society as a whole. And so that's why I titled this particular lesson kind of putting it all together, right? So bringing these overarching ideas and combining the citizen and the state. So putting these two very distinct things, right? One of them, this very natural, organic thing, the citizen, this human being, um, as opposed to something that is man-made, something that's created, the state. So we're just going to spend some time kind of talking about their interactions with one another. So first off, I want to remind everybody that the government is ours. It literally and completely, totally belongs to us as a whole, right? I don't own the White House personally, but we as a nation do. It is ours. The Constitution is ours. The state governments are ours. Um, and it's easy to forget that sometimes. We are very blessed in this country to have what's known as a Republican style of mixed government. So Republican, think representative democracy, right? Going back to one of the very, very first lessons that we had this semester, so talking about the different kinds of government. Republicanism relies on representation. It draws on the idea of democracy where citizens are all considered to be equal in a very real sense. And rather than having all the citizens gather in the Capitol every 3 weeks or something to vote on all the matters, right? We don't mess with that. But instead, we have representatives who go out and go to the Capitol, talk about the issues, figure out what needs to be done. Um, but as I mentioned just a moment ago, these representatives are highly dependent on us. We, the people, the voting population, at least, are the ones who determine who the representatives will be. Um, Little plug here, don't forget, register to vote. I know I was hitting it home not too long ago, but get out there, register, because if you don't, somebody else is going to be responsible for getting elected officials into office, not you. So we have a government that is dependent on us, right? Not every single day, right? The government, we don't have elections every day with thumbs up, thumbs down like the president. We don't go into that detail. We have a lot of systems in place to help our democracy function without that constant checking in. We do have a mixed government as well, meaning we have a government that has separate branches of government. We have parts of the government which is very closely tied to the people. Think House of Representatives, where they have to come back to us every 2 years. We have something that's a bit of an aristocratic element as well in the Senate, right? They have 6 long years to do their job, and without having to come back and touch base with their constituents. We also have this sort of monarchic element in the form of the president, and especially modern presidents have a bunch of power that they wield in a lot of different ways. But regardless of the kind or the style of our government, it's still representative. It's still dependent on us. And so, with that in mind, we as a citizen have a duty to not only own it, but also to kind of keep tabs on it, right? We are supposed to track our government, figure out what they're doing, if we like it or not. And this is an ongoing thing. Um, I know it's easy to get involved right around election times, and oh man, there's going to be a new president. Great, I'm super involved in politics, and then, you know, 2 weeks after the election, done with that, and then you check in 4 years later, right? You can't do that. Um, you have to be aware of what's going on. This government is yours. And if you aren't paying attention, if you're not keeping tabs, if you're not reaching out to your representatives every so often, I guarantee you someone else is. And if you're not doing it, that's someone else. It's their voice, it's their opinion, it's their interests that are going to get followed, not yours. So yeah, we control the government. The government's supposed to speak on our behalf in some form or another, but we also have to make sure that they are doing that. And if they're not, well, we vote them out. And if there is an egregious violation of that trust, well, we can even kick them out of office in the process of impeachment. All right, great, check. Government is ours. But I really also want to caution or make some comment. I don't know what the right phrasing here is, but want to remind us that the government is not here to give us everything that we need, not treat us like a baby. Um, the government is here to provide some level of security to the nation itself, to you and me, to kind of catch bad guys, right? To excuse me, ensure that if our property is stolen, it gets returned to us, or if somebody assaults us, well, that person gets punished. If somebody discriminates against us in some way, right? That they are are punished again for violating my particular liberties and my rights. Um, the government is a tool. It's something that we can rely on to provide some basic uh, to fulfill some basic needs that we have. Right? We're humans. We are jealous. We're greedy. We are wrong. We're idiotic sometimes. Right? So not everybody's going to make a perfectly rational decision all the time, or you know, maybe sometimes we get hurt. And so the government's there to kind of be around, right? To help us out a little bit, set up some rules of the game that we can all kind of agree on. Um, the government is unable to protect us from everything, right? The government is not, or rather, excuse me, police are not able to stop every single murder. They're not able to stop every single robbery. The EPA is not able to stop every single polluter. And so, this idea that government could do these things, well, that's a really, really dangerous idea. Because in order to stop every polluter, for example, in order to stop every robbery that takes place, right? Imagine how much more power the government would have, right? The EPA would have to have inspectors at every single factory all the time. There'd be police on every single corner. All of that costs a lot of money. And on top of that, it also provides a lot of information to the government itself. Right? The more powerful, the more controlling, the more able to limit or restrict each of our individual actions. Right? So the more the government can do that, the less room there is for you and me to make decisions to act. Right? Maybe we're running late for work one day, and it's you're on the highway and it's pretty empty, and you think, you know what, I'm just going to go 5-10 miles above the speed limit. Right? Hey, that's your choice. You can do that. You can weigh the pros and cons. The government isn't going to step in and stop every single speeder. Right? You made that choice, and that's your call. And provided you don't hurt somebody else, and you know you're driving safely, chances are, even if a cop does see you, they're not going to stop you, because who's it hurting, really? Right? So we don't want a government that can do everything for us, that can protect us from every single danger, right? If you have kids, or if you have been around people with kids, right? We all know somebody who's got these parents that are just constantly around them. Right? Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what's going on? Hey, what's going on? Hey, can I fix this for you? Right? I've heard them called helicopter parents before, because they're always just hovering around the child. My son, back before all of this this terribleness set in several months ago, we would go to the park several times a week, and every single time that we were there was always this parent who was just literally walking around immediately behind their child with their hands out, like around the kid's hips or shoulders or something, just gonna catch it the second the kid trips. Right? Kids are gonna trip. I'm 30 something years old and I still trip. I haven't figured out walking a lot of times, but I got a lot better at it because I did trip, right? We need to fail sometimes. We need to fall flat on our butts to learn how to stand up and try again. We don't want our parents constantly hovering around us, making sure we brush our teeth every night to make sure we don't get cavities 30 years down the road, right? We don't want that. We need space from the government. One of the greatest tools that we have to give us that space is the 10th Amendment. Um, the 10th Amendment really carves out a lot of space for states as a whole, right? Remember, your 10th Amendment is the one that says anything not given directly to the federal government or prohibited by the Constitution, well, everything else belongs to the states. So the states, especially earlier in our country's history, were this fantastic shield against the federal government, right? Remember, we're afraid of the federal government. The federal government used to be just like the King of England. The president has a whole bunch of powers in foreign policy. We're worried that this federal agency, excuse me, this federal government that has money, that has an army, that has the ability to send post office letter carriers to your house every single day, right? They know where you live, they know what you're into, and they have a military that could punish you, right? We don't want that government to be too powerful. And so the Constitution itself kind of clips the wings of the federal government. And one of the greatest barriers we have against the federal government is the states. Prior to the income tax, 98% of people in America, right, I'm just kind of pulling some random number, I don't have the actual number, but huge percentages of Americans had zero contact with the federal government whatsoever outside of the post office, right? The post office, it's mentioned in the Constitution itself. That's a federal government thing. So unless you enlisted in the military, you didn't deal with the federal government, and the federal government didn't care about you as an individual. Right? It wasn't really until the amendment was passed that allowed for the income tax to be passed that prior to that, the federal government couldn't reach out and touch you directly. Wasn't possible. But now that we did, or sorry, as soon as we did have that income tax, well, now the federal government all of a sudden was concerned about you and what you were up to and what you were doing, right? So, but sorry, I kind of got off track a little bit there, but the states were this barrier, right? All that power that's out there, that's not in the Constitution, well, that belongs to the states because remember, the states are closer to us. It's a lot easier to see what people are doing over in Austin relative to Washington, D.C. It's a lot easier to have a hand in government that's closer, that is more representative because the people in Austin only care about Texas. And yeah, Texas is huge. There's a 30 something million people here, but that's a lot less than 330 million like what we have in the United States today. So our state is more representative of us and it has more power, right? It's closer to us, easier to keep an eye on it. 10th Amendment also allows each state, each area, each region to kind of express itself. Right? If you grew up with siblings, I'm sure that you and your brothers and sisters all have different personalities, right? I'm sure you you share some similarities. Sorry for that. With one another, I certainly do with my brother and sister. But really, I mean, we're different people. We like different. Like my sister, I don't know how she does it, but she loves country music, and to me, it's like fingers on a chalkboard. Just can't do it. Sorry for any country fans, not bragging on it too much, but the the states all have different personalities because all the people have different personalities, right? The South tends to be more hospitable. The North wants to kind of move a little bit faster and be more efficient, right? Whatever it is, and the West has its own personality entirely as well. So the 10th Amendment really allows each region to kind of be itself. And if Texas thinks, you know what, we can get by without a state income tax, great, do it. If New York says, nah, but we need to have that state income tax, okay, fine, do it. Texas wants to be more pro-business, so we have fewer taxes on businesses, great, do it. See if it works. If it does, hey, maybe Louisiana wants to adopt our method. Hey, maybe Montana. Hey, maybe Illinois wants to adopt what Texas is doing in with regard to businesses. Fantastic. Great. If it doesn't work, well, we've got 49 other examples that we can borrow from. So this idea that I'm getting at is this concept that states are little laboratories of democracy, right? Rather than having one plan for the entire nation that every single state has to follow, that chances are won't work, because remember, we're a nation of 330 something million different people and 50 different states and all sorts of different regions, and all of them have different needs and wants and perspectives, right? So rather than having that one size fits all approach, there's so much power that each individual state gets to operate. So each state can figure out its own way. In the same way that as you and your siblings grow up, right, your parents aren't going to dictate every single moment of your life, because all of you and your siblings are different. So you guys go off on your own paths, figure it out on your own. Now, federalism has a huge benefit in allowing for this variety, in allowing our voice to be amplified in a very, very real way. One of the downsides of federalism, though, is that, well, sometimes states screw up as well, right? Even the best of person out there, they're going to make mistakes sometimes. They're going to do things that are just idiotic, right? So you can look at the South, for example, and the example of slavery. That persisted way longer in the South than most other civilized and industrialized Western countries. That's a fact. And under the Constitution, it was protected, in part through the 10th Amendment, through this thing that said, hey, states, you do you, allowing different areas of the country to have different relationships with slaves or free black people, depending on where you were, right? So this does allow for problems to creep into society. Absolutely cannot say anything but that, because that's, of course, true. In the same way, though, it also allowed for things like integration. It also allowed for other places to say, you know what, this is wrong, and to be that better example, and to kind of shine a light on the path of, hey, this is actually really great. You know, when you invite everybody to the table, all of a sudden you got all these different perspectives and da 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 da, right? So yeah, there are going to be problems, but there's also solutions, right? And if there is a problem, it's not a one-size-fit-all problem that the entire country is going to suffer under. If 49 states allowed slavery, but that there was that one state that was free, chances are that one state would probably thrive. And slowly, over time, that example will be looked at. And hopefully, it's going to be heeded. So the 10th Amendment and that idea of states as laboratories of democracy, it allows us to really adopt to changes that take place over time. Now we're going to take a quick break, and please do come back with us. I'm going to jump over to the next slide. I just saw the timestamp on this one, so we'll kind of come back together here in just a moment. So thank you. Go on back.